Welcome back to our discussion of the forearm muscles in understanding human anatomy. In the previous video, we discussed the muscles of the anterior compartment of the forearm. In this video, we'll discuss the muscles of the posterior compartment of the forearm. And the posterior compartment are all extensors except one. And here again, we can divide the muscles into a superficial group and the superficial muscles all originate, at least in part, from the lateral epicondyle and supracondylar ridge. These muscles are Brachioradialis, and you'll notice that I'm writing this one in red. Because it is our exception, it is actually a flexor. However, it only flexes when the hand is half pronated, in the hammerhead position. In that position, it flexes and will then help brachialis with flexion of the elbow. But it is a posterior compartment muscle that is the exception to our general rule. Then they are the extensor carpes, Extensor Carpi radialis, longus, the Extensor Carpi, Radialis, brevis, the Extensor Carpi ulnaris, the Extensor digitorum, the extensor of the digits. We have an extra extensor for the fifth digit, the little digit. The extensor digiti minimi and anconius. Anconius extends the elbow joint, so it assists triceps brachii. The extensor digitorum and digiti minimi are extensors of the digits, and the extensor carpes all extend the wrist. We have two on the lateral side, the radialis longus and brevis, and one inserts on the medial side, the ulnaris. Then we have the deep muscles of the posterior compartment. And they all originate from the radius ulna and interosseous membrane. And these muscles are adductor pollicis longus, the extensor pollicis brevis, the extensor pollicis longus, the extensor indicus, and finally the supinator. So these are the muscles of the forearm, but we can generalize. Their posterior compartment are all extensors except for the one, brachioradialis. Anterior compartment are all flexors except for Pronator Quadratus, which only pronates. It does not flex or have any other action besides pronation. In the anterior compartment we have superficial muscles that take origin from the medial epicondyle, epicondylar ridge, and medial collateral ligament. On the posterior compartment, the superficial muscles take origin from the lateral epicondyle and supracondylar ridge. The deep muscles in both compartments take origin from the radius and ulna. Now let me sketch in the deep muscles in our diagram to complete that. So let's get the superficial muscles. Drawn in. And fill that. And then the deep muscles. Drawn in. And we'll color that in. Now I'd like to take a couple of minutes to talk about the muscles involved in supination and pronation. So let me get a clean slate here and we'll start talking about that. Pronation and supination is an action that is unique to the forearm and hand region. There are two muscles that are involved with each of these actions. So if we look at the muscles that pronate the hand, the two muscles are pronator teres and remember that's one of the superficial muscles in the anterior compartment, and besides pronating it is also a flexor of the elbow, so it fits our general rule. And the second muscle is Pronator Quadratus. It's a deep muscle of the anterior compartment of the forearm. You find it distal in the compartment, and it runs between the radius and ulna. And since it doesn't cross any of the other joints, it can only pronate. Now, the muscles that supinate the primary muscle that supinates the hand might surprise you because it's a muscle of the anterior compartment of the arm, the biceps brachii. It's a strong supinator, and in fact supination is its primary action, its first action. Only after the hand is supinated can the biceps flex the elbow joint. That is why, for example, doing pull-ups is much harder than doing chin-ups. In chin-ups, the hand is supine, so you get to use biceps along with brachialis, two big muscles. But when you do a pull-up, you pronated the hand, and thus biceps cannot be active. Remember, I asked you to feel your bicep muscle when you flexed it and then pronate your hand. See how the bulge goes away. Well, that's just what happens when you're doing a pull-up. The biceps is not active, so you only have the brachialis muscle, making it a much more difficult exercise. The other supination muscle is supinator, which is a relatively small muscle in the posterior compartment. It does supinate, but it also crosses the elbow joint on the posterior side. So it is a weak extensor of the elbow. But its primary action, and compared with the other extensors, namely triceps, supinator isn't much help in extension. But it is a muscle that's important in supinating. That will conclude our discussion of the forearm muscles. In the next video, I want to talk about retinacula. These are dense connective tissue membranes, bands, that hold tendons against bones. So we'll talk about retinacula in the next session. Thank you for your attention.